All right, two comments were left. One mentioned that Gene Shepard only did 20-minute stories. I think they were a little longer than 20 minutes. I've listened to some of his old stuff. It's on the internet if you want to listen to it. Uh, but another person mentioned getting a clock from a company. The father wants, I guess the father died, and the mother wants the son to take the clock, and the wife doesn't want the clock in the house because it's too gaudy. Now, when I used to go visit people that worked in RCA, I only worked there probably 2 years, but they were older than me, and a lot of them were very wise and very nice. So I did go visit them, and when you went in their house, there was RCA everything. They were really loyal workers, and they would get these awards. Now, what you're looking at in front of you is two sets of TRW pen set. Each one represents 5 years. I also had TRW pins. Each one represented 5 years. I sold the TRW pins on eBay along with my attendance pins from being an Episcopal, from the Episcopal Church. I sold that. They're gold. So a person knows approximately how much gold is in these things, and they buy them up and then they melt them down. And well, anyway, so you have two sets of cross pens that are awards for TRW, and in the front are my father's Resistaflex units. Now this one here, somebody mounted it for him on a tie clip. It's got a diamond in it. Other ones have little tiny diamonds. But my father worked 35 years, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Yeah, 35 years with Resistaflex. It might have been more than that. I think at the end, they got bought out and they were owned by a holding company. So he might not have gotten his 40th year pin. But so someone mentioned me the stuff. Now, the best story I ever went through about awards. All right. Now, there was a guy, I'll tell you his name, he's dead now. His name was Gene Pianko. He lived in either Kearney or Harrison. And Gene had a lot of years in TRW, RCA. Here's how it worked. All these GIs come home from World War II, and they're in a bar in Harrison. And that's Pianko might have also lived in Harrison. Well, anyway, they come home from the war, and they're all hanging out at this bar. And some guy comes through the front door of the bar, and he screams into the bar, "Hey, they're hiring at RCA." And a bunch of men immediately got up, and they went down the block to RCA, and they went into the personnel, and they got hired. And they would train you on the job as a technician. Doing tube tests, and you got a very specific job. I explained to you that Padner would put a box on a thing. You'd hit a button, it would go up in the air, hit a button again, and it would come back down and hit. And then that box would be given to the girl, and she'd take the tubes out and test them. They were testing them it was called a drop test. And there were a lot of jobs in RCA like that, where a person only learned how to do one simple job. And but you're expected a certain amount of output each day. All right, so Gene Pianko, uh, he comes up to me and he says, "Look," he says, "they're having a dinner in my honor. Uh, would you go?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "During lunch hour, we go down to the cafeteria, and we have you have a boneless chicken or whatever." The cafeteria is really big. It has special rooms, just like you would have in a large uh, restaurant, private rooms, and you go in there and you would order items that weren't on the normal cafeteria menu. And it became a thing. All the people that worked in my area wanted me to go to the dinners when they got their 30 years. Let's just say it's a 30-year pin. That's about right. 1970 from 45. Yeah, 30 years. So they over the years they had fights with people. So when they were allowed to bring like three guests or two guests, and the department guys, the bosses would come. So what I would do is I'd do a stand-up routine, and after a while I got banned by Duckworth. He's dead now. Hope he's spinning in his grave. But Duckworth was brought into RCA to do the layoffs, and so Pianko has me come to his dinner, and we come in. There's a surf and turf dinner sitting on the table, and the woman says, "Does anybody here want the surf and turf?" And the guy says, "It's cold." So they take it away. So I order my boneless chicken. We all get our dinner, and Pianko orders the surf and turf. Well, they bring the same dinner back again, and they didn't even heat it up. And he starts bitching and moaning and going on. And I'm eating my boneless chicken. I'm totally ignoring him. So we get back from the dinner, and he's still going on and on and on about how they didn't have the decency to make another surf and turf. And so his dinner was a total washout. But I got up and I did my stand-up routine, and I sort of insulted Duckworth a little bit, and I got banned from future dinners. I had already done like 5 dinners, but I always got the boneless chicken. It was pretty good. And so Gene's still going on and on and on. So the next day, he comes in, and they walk up to him, no ceremony or anything. They just hand him a box. And he opens it up, and there's a watch in there for 30 years. And the back's not on the watch. And he starts bitching and moaning. And he calls the union guy up, and he was too abrasive on the phone to get anybody to care about him. And you got to watch when you're dealing with union guys or anything like that. If you rub someone the wrong way, they're gonna stretch it out. So I'm at RCA still working, and it's a weekly thing with him. I still didn't get the back for the watch. See, what happens, they bought a bunch of watches, they take the back off the watch, and that goes to an engraver. And then the company calls the engraver up and tells them what to put on the back of the watch. That goes over to a jeweler who has the watch without the back. They put the back on the watch, they put it in a box, they ship it to the union hall, and then the union hall guy brings it over to RCA, and in the ceremony at the dinner, hands the guy his watch. Well, Pianko rubbed people the wrong way, so even when he got laid off, and the day he got laid off, he made believe he was going to run his car into mine by the parking lot. And I swung out of the way, and just as I got up to the next corner, right there, a kid came through who had just done his brakes, and he didn't put the little things on the drums, and he had no brakes, and he slammed into my car, and he did very little damage, more damage on his car. And I said, if my back door still works, we won't report this. So anyway, and Pianko went by. Pianko was all nervous because he sort of caused the accident. Well, anyway, Pianko leaves, and I stay with the kid, and he lives right there. And I go over, and we take the wheel off the car. And I said, that plunger has to go on there. And he left the plungers off the brake shoes. He's lucky they didn't pop out. Well, anyway, now he knows. I go home. As I'm coming up the street, this is just coincidental, this other kid's got his car up in the air. He's got the tire off it, and then I said, he goes, I can't get the brakes to work. I said, yeah, those things right there. I said, I just went through this with another kid. So I showed him where you put the plungers or the pistons back on the drums. So that was that. Well, anyway, so Pianko gets let go, and I sort of kept in touch with him. He still didn't have the back for the watch. All right, so now I'm up in. I got laid off, and I'm up in Radio Shack, and we had these records that are vinyl records way back, and they were they were overages. No, they were just the records that didn't sell, and they put a slit in them, and they send them back, and they try to sell them a second time through other means. Well, in Radio Shack, we got a big batch of records. And one of them was Tommy James and Shondells, and it was called Cellophane Symphony, And I took one home and I played it. And on the back, on the very end, the last song, uh, on behalf of the entire staff and management, we hope to express. Well, anyway, it's a song. On behalf of the entire staff and management, we'd like to express with point of view on behalf of the entire staff management. They give him a watch, and the guy puts the watch up to his ears, and it's not working. And they're all singing. They're all drunk, and my watch doesn't work. My watch. Well, anyway, I thought the thing was so funny that I'm telling the manager the Pianko story about not getting a watch without the back on it. So as we're playing it, we're standing there. Who comes in the Radio Shack? I mean, miles from my house. Gene Pianko. And I'm standing there, I go, so this song remind you anything? And he's listening. He goes, yeah. He goes, I got the back for the watch finally. I said, the reason you didn't get the back when you were supposed to is you being a real jerk about it. We were the RCA was closing down. Things were changing. But he was yelling at the union management. All the union management had to do was go over to the engraver and get he screwed himself. And he never worked again. He went on the Trade Readjustment Act and then faded away. But someone asked me, did I ever get something from the company? I have two pen sets, pen and pencil sets, and I had these other pens. And every time I got a pen for like 5 years, you'd look at it and you're like, eh. And well, the guy next to me, he was a boss, and he says to me, there's a way when you're going to get an award, you go over to the other building and you tell them what you want. You don't have to take a pen. You can take a pen set or pen and pencil. Now have I got this the right way? I don't have my glasses on. Yeah, it's this way. Now let me get it into the frame. See, instead of getting a pen with this stupid little TRW logo on, you can get on a pen, which the guy told me is a better deal, and it is. It's a cross pen. And I use these two pens, two pens. The pencils I don't use, but I use these two pens all the time. And it's funny, but I'm including the song in the comments. Tommy James and Shondell, you can click on it. And it's pretty funny if you've gone through this. But all you have to do is mention some type of subject, and I have a song or a story about it. And this one guy one time said to me, how do you have so many stories? I said, well, first of all, I put myself out there. And the more people you deal with, the more stupid stuff, the more funny stuff. And then I also have a really good memory. And I remember the stuff, what happened. But I remember my dad, I think this was his 5-year pin. I found this down in the machine shop or in the cellar one time. This is the 5-year. But he got one for each 5 years of service. And I think that I'm pretty sure he had 40 years. So the last company that bought it was American Match Company, was the holding company for Resistaflex. So I don't think he got something last year. But I can't bring myself to sell these pins. My father really liked this company. And then I thought it was such a big company and great company. He'd tell me as a kid, it was nothing compared to the places I worked. I told you the one time he was using my car. And he in the morning, I would drive to work and then get out, and he would take my car to work. This was giving him trouble. And then one time I said, you want to come in and see what I do? And, it's a rug floor. It's air conditioned. And I was really good at the job. And I had this soft, cushy chair. And he's looking at me. I'm showing him how to repair a circuit board, how to check it with the scope, change the chips, put it back in, it works, do a test. And then he didn't say nothing. He went home and he says to me, we come back home and he goes up to my mother and she says, what's the matter? He goes, I saw what Johnny does for a living. And she goes, what's it like? And he goes, he should pay them. Yeah, he was like, do you realize how easy you have it? I'm like, hey, I went to tech school. And guess who didn't pay for the tech school? You. I paid for the tech school. You know, yeah, you gave me the roof over my head, but I had to work to save up the money, and I had the money for tech school when I was in high school. I already had it saved up. You know, didn't go anywhere, didn't do anything. Took my paycheck each week, my $66, put the down payment on the school, and the whole thing. So I deserved what I got. Now my father I told you, was a sort of a coal miner. He didn't like the coal. He didn't like the coal mines anymore. So they put him. His father was the head of the coal mine. Put him outside sorting coal, and then he got a job at the store in the area. I don't think it was a company store. I think it was just a small store, and he had to go every morning and go get milk fat because dirt cows. It was a dairy. Dirt cows were old, and there wasn't enough fat content, so they had to go buy cream or something from another farm, bring it over, and mix it. That was one of my father's jobs. And then Jimmy, James, and Mert talked my father into coming to New Jersey for a couple days, and then they wouldn't go back with him. They said, "We're staying here," and then my father decided to stay. And I told you years later, I went up to Vanling. It's Vanling, Pennsylvania. And I went there. We were walking through the town. It's hilarious. We're walking, and down the stairs comes. I hear, "Hey, Johnny! Hey, Johnny!" And my father looks over and he goes, "I think that's my old boss that I had when I was a little kid." And it was. And he was mad at my father for quitting. So he just asked my father about his brothers and sisters. He never said to my father, "So how you doing?" No, he was still holding a grudge because my father just quit on him. But and a couple of weeks later, my dad used to get the hometown newspaper. He goes, "Remember that guy?" I said, "Your old boss? Yeah, he died." I said, "Yeah, he lived just long enough to see you one more time." There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in the world, but you have to get out there. And most people, if they go for a walk, they don't talk to other people, and I do. And the more people you talk to, the more situations you'll learn. Sometimes they'll get you into one of their nonsense things. But yeah, I always tell people when they start to insult me, "Boy, you sure talk a lot." You know, when I'm talking to one person, they combine. I'm not talking to them because I'm talking to them. They'll make somebody say, "Yeah. I'm vaccinated with a phonograph needle." That's what the one guy in metal shop said to me, Pete Marshall. "Man, you're vaccinated with a phonograph needle," because anybody come up and sit down next to me and start talking to me. And I had experience on stuff that in the machine shop that these guys never knew. I had my tools at home. I had my tools at home, and that's the way it's been. It's like you ask me about radios and stuff. If you really want to, I know how they work. You know, there's certain areas I'm a little soft on, like the ratio discriminators and the FM. And some of them can be tricky, especially if it's not working and somebody's been in there. That's the hard radios to fix. If you get a radio that's just dead, I told you about the one in Retz. As soon as the guy opened it up next to me, he died, Bill Toth. And I looked at it and I said, "This thing's been struck by lightning." "How do you know that?" I said, the front end coil from the terminals, there's two terminals on the FM radio for the antenna. And I said, "There's no wire going up to it's burnt away." And I said, "You're going to find that the power supply has got blown diodes." And that's what he found. But then he forgot that I told him it was hit by lightning. And then a couple days later, he's still on the radio. I said, "What's going on?" So then I went over and I said, "You need a piece of wire up from the terminals, wrap it around the coil. That would be the RF, front end RF coil, and then back down to the other terminal." "Well, how many turns?" I said, "Like 2. "Well, how do you know it's just," I said, I worked on radios before. And I had an uncle that he lived on Lightning Hill in Belleville, New Jersey. And every time there was a lightning storm, it would burn the front end tuner out, the windings from the antenna to the RF coil. They'd be gone. And the power supply, he'd lose a few diodes. And he would explain that to me. I said, "Yeah, I understand. The electrons come in through the plug up into the TV or into the radio, and then they try to exit out the antenna, or the lightning comes down from the sky into the antenna of the radio or television and tries to go to ground through the power supply. And a lot of times you get lucky, and it doesn't burn anything out in between. but it's experience. You know, my uncle kept saying, yeah, all I have to do is change 3 diodes or 2 diodes in the power supply. And then he says up in the tuner, the the windings on the RF coil, they're gone. And that was back in the tube days. Don't try that at home with transistors. You could lose every single part in the radio. And I told you, my father bought that cheap radio, couldn't get the schematic. I told him not to hook it on an outside aerial. He wanted Lake Success. He made me put a switch on it in the closet to go between cable and outside antenna. All it was off on the dial by about 1/8 of an inch when you switched to cable TV. But he was getting, I guess, cognitive decline. My mom had died. He was getting strange. And no, I want to listen to the signal straight from Lake Success. And then one day I come home, radio will work. I said, yeah, let me check the antenna. Well, still on. Oh, really? Yeah. I said, well, you can't fix it. I couldn't fix that radio. That thing was smoldered, all right? And then I couldn't get the schematic. I couldn't figure out what, the transistors weren't marked. And when we were buying the radio, I went with him and I said, look, don't go too cheap. He bought the same insides as what he had in an Admiral thing that my uncle sold him. It's just the same circuit. It's junk, you know. But he went to the store to get a really good stereo. And by the time he got there, he kept getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And, you know, he didn't even buy speakers. I bought a pair up from the seller, Nova 8s, and put them out for him to use. And he goes, well, they wanted too much for the speakers. I don't know what he was expecting. We went to a House of Audio. It was on Great Notch Hill in Little Falls. And it went through the peak of audio, and then that place closed down. But we started at the, you know, like $1,000 Marantz section, and he's like, this is way too much. You said you want to really, and he ended up getting the same insides as what he already had. And it's just sad, some of the stuff. But I have a really good memory. And sometimes I tell people I wish I didn't have a good memory. People's names now, I don't have as much drive to remember names anymore. I tell people I know too many people. Nothing really good has come along or come from it. You know, people, after you found a job in a place, in my case, I'd get in a place and they wouldn't say to me, oh, we knew that there was an opening there. No, they show up. I had people, every time I got hired somewhere, they would show up and get in using my name. And I screwed up. I had a close friend of mine whose brother worked in Bell Labs. I forgot about that. That was some type of mental block. I always wanted to get in Bell Labs. I'd send them resumes, and they would never even return the call. Same with Hoffman LaRoche in Nutley. And then I actually walked with a guy that worked there, and towards the end, they were sending everything out. They weren't really letting him work on anything anymore, and he said it really sucked. And I'm saying, well, I'm glad I didn't have to go through that. But yeah, I'm gonna, on the comment section, I'm gonna link the song that was playing in the Radio Shack when the guy who had trouble with the watch came in. That's one of those things that just happens in life. And I'm sitting there telling them a story about Gene Pianko's watch and not getting the back because it was at the engravers, and they gave him the watch without the back. The next day, they didn't give him it at the dinner, and they gave him the surf and turf dinner that was cold. And that's all he would get in these loops where he couldn't talk. He couldn't say anything different. He's just going, they gave me a surf and turf that was cold. That was the one when we came in there that was there that nobody wanted. And then he couldn't get out of the loop. And then when he's sitting there, he should have stood up and said, look, I ordered surf and turf. This is cold. This is the one that was. No, he waited till they leave to complain to us instead of complaining to the person that's going to count or it's going to matter. They're going to fix it. No, that's not what he did. But the whole thing's hilarious stuff. I think that's it. All right, that's it. Look for the comment section for the song.